This HOA Karen destroyed my trash can 57 times with their $60,000 Escalade, so I replaced it with a concrete one, and ended up watching her destroy her own SUV instead. What started as a routine morning of property damage ended with criminal charges, a $12,000 settlement, one very expensive life lesson about bullying the wrong neighbor. Picture this. Dawn's silence broken by the sharp crack of plastic shattering, the metallic scrape of bumper against asphalt. A pearl-white Escalade speeds away, leaving my garbage scattered like confetti across the driveway again. But here's the thing about bullies. They never expect their victims to fight back with actual concrete evidence. By the time I was finished, this self-appointed compliance officer had demolished her own luxury SUV, exposed a $47,000 embezzlement scheme, and learned the hard way that some neighbors refuse to be intimidated by clipboards and fake authority. Seriously, what would you do if your neighbor treated your driveway like a demolition derby every single morning? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see if this kind of HOA madness happens in your town too. Let me back up. My name's the homeowner, 47 years old, a licensed electrician for over 2 decades. Recently divorced, fighting for joint custody of my 2 teens, Tyler, 18, and Tyler, 16. We live in Pinewood Gardens, one of those cookie-cutter HOA suburbs in Ohio, where lawns must be trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches and mailboxes come in only 5 approved colors. I bought my corner lot house 5 years ago after the divorce, hoping for a fresh start, decent schools, safe streets, rooms for the kids. What I didn't count on was neighbor. She's a 54-year-old widow who basically crowned herself the neighborhood's compliance officer, a role that doesn't even exist in our HOA bylaws. Neighbor drives a pearl-white Escalade the size of a small apartment. She knows every rule by heart, treats our monthly dues like her personal slush fund, and because she's buddies with the HOA president, Gerald Thornfield, she's basically untouchable. Here's where location matters. My corner lot means trash pickup requires me to place my bin near the street every Monday morning. City law says it must be within 5 feet of the curb. That just happens to be the exact path neighbor takes for her morning power walk at 6:15. A.M. The first incident happened on a Monday in January. Was getting the kids ready for school, coffee brewing, wind crack. The sound of plastic exploding like a gunshot. I ran outside to find my trash can obliterated, garbage scattered across the driveway. And there's neighbor, backing up her Escalade, rolling down her window with a fake, syrupy smile. Oh my, these streets are just so narrow. I hope you weren't too attached to that old thing. Old thing? I'd bought it brand new a week earlier for $23. Still, I kept my cool. I picked up soggy cereal boxes and coffee filters while my kids watched from the window. Embarrassed that first week it happened. 5 more times? Every morning, same exact routine, her SUV, the crunch of plastic, and silence as she drove away. By the following Monday, I knew it wasn't an accident. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Linda, confirmed it. She whispered in her careful English, "She takes the long way on purpose. There's plenty of room on the other side, but she drives close to your can every time." I confronted neighbor once, during one of her afternoon patrols. Hey, about the trash can situation. She cut me off with a sugar-coated smile. "Homeowner, you must be new to community living. These streets were designed for normal-sized vehicles, not oversized containers blocking traffic. Maybe you should consider placement timing adjustments, as if there's some magical hour when garbage trucks don't need bins at the curb." That night, I dug into property law, HOA bylaws, and city ordinances. Turns out trash cans placed on public right-of-way are still personal property, and our HOA has no authority to regulate them, as long as they're at the curb only on pickup day by the end of the month. I'd already replaced 4 cans, spent nearly $100, and my kids were stressed. Even my custody evaluator had noted neighborhood stability concerns. Something had to change. That's when the smirk started. Neighbor began making direct eye contact during her demolition runs, her little grin saying she knew exactly what she was doing. By mid-February, she escalated from property destruction to psychological warfare. A certified letter arrived, Improper trash receptacle placement, creating a traffic hazard. Section 4.7. 3. No obstruction of vehicular traffic patterns. Remedy within 72 hours, or face $50 daily fines. It looked official, but I wasn't fooled. My years as an electrician taught me, when something doesn't add up, dig deeper. I researched harder. City code required trash placement within 5 feet of the curb on collection day. In HOA jurisdiction, it ends at the property line. They had no legal power over my trash can. I set up a ring camera to capture video evidence. Hired a surveyor to confirm my placement. Even got Mrs. Linda's written statement, though. She trembled signing it. I don't want trouble, but this isn't right. Meanwhile, neighbor launched a smear campaign on Nextdoor, painting me as a reckless homeowner endangering children. She even filed for separate complaints with the city, one obviously written by her, submitted at 247A.M. by the next HOA board meeting. I had a thick folder of evidence. The room was packed 12 homeowners, the biggest turnout in years. President Thornfield kept tugging at his tie. Neighbor sat there in a blazer, trying to look official, but her hands trembled. When it was my turn, I stood up, to address the violation notice regarding trash can placement. The room went silent. I read the city ordinance aloud, displayed my survey results, showed video footage of her Escalade plowing into my cans, and then I dropped the final card. My consultation with a property rights attorney who had noticed a pattern of selective enforcement, neighbor's face went pale. Thornfield cleared his throat 5 times before saying, "Well, this requires further review. We'll table this matter pending additional consideration." And that was the beginning of the end for neighbor. They had no defense, and everyone in that room knew it. But neighbor wasn't finished. As we filed out of the meeting, she cornered me under the buzzing parking lot lights. Her mask finally slipped. "You think you're clever?" she hissed, loud enough for a dozen neighbors still chatting nearby to hear. "People like you move into nice neighborhoods and think rules don't apply. Well, this is just the beginning." Mrs. Johnny from Maple Street audibly gasped. Eli Torres, our maintenance guy, suddenly found his keys fascinating. The tension in the air was thick. Her hostility was impossible to miss. What she didn't realize was that my phone, tucked casually into my shirt pocket, captured every single word. That night, my daughter Tyler asked me, "Dad, why does that mean lady hate us so much?" My son Tyler wanted to know if we'd have to move again. I tucked them into bed, promising them everything would work out. But in truth, I was already calculating the cost of this war. 5 destroyed trash cans. 14 hours of documentation, attorney fees stacking up. Still, something had shifted. Neighbors began whispering about board overreach, about favoritism and selective enforcement. Neighbor's parking lot meltdown hadn't just exposed her temper, revealed what many had suspected all along. This wasn't about traffic safety or community standards. It was about power, control, and putting certain people in their place. The very next morning, neighbor's behavior changed. Instead of her usual reckless drive-by, she slowed down in front of my trash can, staring at it like a general studying the battlefield. The game was evolving, which meant bigger trouble was coming. March hit Pinewood Gardens like a cold slap, and neighbor came back swinging. While I was quietly celebrating what felt like a small victory, she was digging through our HOA bylaws. Like a prosecutor building a case, the attacks came in waves. First, a violation notice claiming my grass height 2.75 inches was over the 2.5-inch maximum. Next, my mailbox, once heritage blue, was now accused of being an unauthorized, weathered navy. Then, 5 tiny tears in my window screens were deemed violation stares, so small you'd need a magnifying glass to even see. Each fined. $50? Due in 10 days? But here's the thing. I wasn't the only one with these so-called violations. I spent an entire Saturday walking the neighborhood with a measuring tape and camera, documenting proof. Gerald Thornfield's grass, pushing 5 inches. Mrs. Patterson's mailbox, the same faded shade as mine. Half of Maple Street had hail damaged. Screens. Yet, somehow, only my property drew citations. While neighbor was playing prosecutor, I was playing engineer. One afternoon at Home Depot, I vented to an old acquaintance, Dale Kowalski, who's been pouring concrete for 23 years. He listened, then smirked knowingly. You know, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee with a paint stick. City, code doesn't say what material a trash can has to be made from. Plastic, metal, concrete doesn't matter. As long as it holds trash and meets size limits, you're fine. That single comment planted the seed for neighbor's worst nightmare. 60 pounds of concrete mix, steel rebar for reinforcement, a standard plastic shell modified into something far stronger. The total cost? $47, fraction of what I'd already lost replacing cans and paying fines. But first, I had to counter her harassment. So I compiled a detailed photo record of every similar violation around the neighborhood. Then, on Wednesday, I filed a formal complaint against the HOA board for selective enforcement. One thing I've learned after 2 decades of handling permits: bureaucrats hate when you use their own rules against them. My complaint forced the board to either enforce the bylaws fairly across all homeowners or admit they were targeting me. Neither option played in neighbors' favor. As I dug deeper, I noticed an even darker pattern. Over the past year, neighbor had issued 67 violation notices. 49 went to single parents, elderly residents, or minorities. Only 18 were aimed at longtime homeowners or married couples. The bias was glaring, and the potential legal implications were massive. Fair housing violations can trigger federal investigations. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. The thought of neighbor having to explain her enforcement patterns to a lawyer made me smile. That Friday, I began my weekend project. Tyler and Tyler thought it was hilarious, helping me mix cement in the garage while classic rock played on my old radio. The sharp, earthy scent of concrete brought back memories of helping my dad pour our basement floor 5 decades ago, a smell that meant permanence. Something built to last. The engineering was simple but effective. A hollow bottom section 4. Weight distribution, drainage holes to keep it functional, and an exterior that looked identical to every other trash can on the street. From the outside, no one could tell the difference. But inside, 60 pounds of reinforced concrete waited to teach neighbor a painful lesson about physics Monday morning. Wheeled my new creation to the curb like always. At 6:15 sharp, I heard the familiar rumble of neighbor's Escalade, but this time she slowed, clearly suspicious. She lined up and rammed the can at about 15 miles per hour, her usual speed. The result was instant and completely different. Instead of the crunch of shattered plastic, there was a deep, solid thunk, followed by the screech of metal against concrete. Her SUV's running board bent like tin foil while my trash can stood there, unscathed. From my kitchen window, coffee mug warming my hands, I watched her freeze in disbelief. She revved the engine and tried again from another angle. Same result, more damage to her vehicle, none to mine. The beauty of it all? It's completely legal. No city codes violated, no HOA rules broken, just a homeowner with a sturdier trash can. If she wanted to keep ramming it, that was her choice. Her insurance claim by the end of the week. Her pearl-white Escalade wore over $800 worth of fresh dents and scratches. My concrete trash can, barely a scuff. For the first time, the neighborhood chatter wasn't about me. It was about her, neighbor, the self-pointed enforcer. It's quickly losing her grip on the story she'd worked so hard to control. Homeowner, that woman was in your driveway last night with a flashlight. And a scale? That's what my neighbor told me the next morning. Apparently, neighbor had been creeping around my property at midnight, trying to weigh my trash can like it was some kind of classified artifact. I couldn't help but laugh at the mental picture her. In that stiff navy blazer and those no-nonsense shoes, crouched over my garbage with a bathroom scale. Honestly, the woman needed a hobby that didn't involve trespassing, but her obsession only grew stronger. By midweek, Lai Torres, our maintenance guy, mentioned that neighbor had cornered him at the hardware store. She grilled him about who had been buying concrete lately, pressing for names like some kind of bargain bin detective. She even started stalking my social media accounts, combing through Facebook posts for construction hints in my weekend project updates. Then came her next desperate move, weaponizing city bureaucracy. That Thursday, a weary building inspector named Pete knocked on my door. Clipboard in hand, he explained. Ma'am filed a complaint. Something about unauthorized concrete structures on residential property. I led him to the infamous trash can. He gave it a 30-second look, sighed, and shook his head. It's a garbage container, not a foundation. No permits required, no violations present. Honestly, I've seen people build entire sheds without this much scrutiny. But neighbor wasn't ready to quit her campaign of harassment. Next week, I received a notice from the HOA demanding immediate access to my property for compliance verification. The letter, clearly written by neighbor and rubber-stamped by President Thornfield, claimed they needed to inspect my exterior modifications for safety violations. Too bad I'd done my homework. After her first violation notice, I had spent hours reading about property rights, Fourth Amendment protections, and HOA limits. A landmark case in Arat, v. Lakeside Village made one thing clear. HOAs can't just go on fishing expeditions. They need specific cause or an emergency. So my reply was polite but firm. No private property access without a court order or a genuine emergency. If you want to inspect my trash can, you're welcome to view it from the public sidewalk like everyone else. The smell of neighbors' frustration was almost as satisfying as fresh concrete. Meanwhile, her daily war with my reinforced trash can was becoming a neighborhood spectacle. Every morning, another dent, another scratch on her pearl-white Escalade. The running board now dangled like a broken wing. Her bumper wore spiderweb cracks, and one headlight rattled ominously. Neighbors noticed. On Saturday, I overheard 5 different conversations about the crazy woman who keeps hitting the same trash can. Mrs. Johnny even started timing neighbors' drive-bys. The teenagers on Elm Street? They'd created a betting pool for each day's outcome. At dinner, my daughter, Tyler, groaned, "Dad, kids at school are asking if we're the family with the concrete can lady." I don't know whether to hide or brag about having the coolest revenge story in town. Tyler, ever practical, chimed in. We could sell tickets. $5 a seat. I'd have college tuition covered in a month. But the real breakthrough came from Patricia Lopez, the only board member with a shred of common sense. One evening, near the community center's coffee station, she pulled me aside and whispered, "Homeowner, you need 2 no-neighbors been having private meetings. With Gerald, she's pushing for expanded board authority. Property inspections, material restrictions, even contractor background checks. And there's something else. She keeps pushing for these maintenance contracts with a company no one's ever heard of. It's like she's been planning this for months. That stopped me cold. Because if neighbors' obsession wasn't just about control, maybe it was about profit. So that night, I launched a new investigation. Public records can reveal incredible things if you know where to look. By Sunday evening, my hunch turned into hard evidence. Neighbor wasn't just a control freak. She was running a scheme. A quick search revealed Neighbor Construction LLC, formed just 6 months earlier. Neighbor was listed as a 40% owner, her husband Richard as president. The timing lined up perfectly. Company formed in May. First HOA bid in July, and my harassment starting that January. It got worse over the last 4 months. Neighbor Construction had won 7 HOA maintenance contracts, totaling $23,400 playground repairs, landscaping, sidewalk touch-ups. Every single bid had undercut competitors by just $50, $100. Enough to seem legitimate, but precise enough to guarantee victory. And guess who voted yes every single time? Neighbor 7 contracts, 7 votes, 7 payouts straight, into her family's business account. The conflict of interest wasn't just obvious, it was screaming. State law requires HOA board members to disclose financial ties to vendors. Neighbor hadn't, which meant civil liability, possible criminal charges, and automatic removal from the board once exposed. The timeline sealed it. January 3rd, harassment campaign begins. January 15th, I first ask about rising maintenance costs. She had launched her attacks on me 12 days after. I'd innocently questioned where the money was going. That trash can hadn't just been blocking her, Suvi. It had been shielding evidence of a scheme to siphon money from 127 homeowners. Fraud, embezzlement, corruption, and neighbor was desperate enough to destroy anyone who stood in her way. I gathered everything: business registration documents, HOA minutes, contract records, even bank deposits. I printed copies, saved digital backups across 5 cloud services, and sent the whole package to attorney Amanda Sterling with a single note: urgent review requested. Criminal implications possible. Neighbor thought she was fighting some stubborn neighbor over a trash can. She had no idea her real battle had just begun. What neighbor was really facing wasn't just neighborhood gossip, was the unraveling of a fraud scheme that could put her in federal prison and destroy her family's finances. On Monday morning, I stood at my kitchen window watching her daily routine. She lined up her Escalade for another collision attempt against my concrete trash can fortress. At this point, her SUV had racked up over $1,200 in damage, while Maiken stood unshaken like a monument to her own stubborn foolishness. But for the first time since this all began, I wasn't thinking about trash cans, HOA bylaws, or morning demolition derbies. My mind was on something bigger: justice, protecting our community, and the quiet thrill of knowing that bullies sometimes get bitten harder than they ever expect. That evening, my garage transformed from a hobby workshop into a strategy room worthy of a Pentagon operation. The workbenches were cleared, folding tables set up, and 5 mismatched chairs circled around a makeshift evidence board I'd built. With construction paper and red string straight out of a crime thriller, by 7 p.m. sharp, my core team arrived. Mrs. Linda came first, clutching her thermos of jasmine tea, eyes filled with nervous determination. Eli Torres followed in his maintenance uniform, his tool belt clattering with every step. Tricia Lopez carried a stack of HOA financial records she'd carefully borrowed from the board files. Last was Dale Kowalski, grinning like this was a surprise party as he set down a box of donuts. "All right," I said, taping the final chart to the wall. "Here's what we're dealing with." The evidence looked like it belonged to a federal case. We uncovered $23,000 in suspicious contracts, 7 clear conflicts of interest, 47 documented harassment incidents, and 1 badly battered Escalade rolling proof of neighbor's unraveling state of mind. Patricia whistled softly as she flipped through the financial analysis. She had always suspected something was off, but never imagined it was this systematic. Dale examined the photos of the vehicle damage and shook his head. "That bumper alone's a $2,000 fix. To add alignment issues, and she'll be burning through tires for months. Your concrete fortress is teaching her a very expensive life lesson." We spent the next hour building a 4-pronged strategy. Jim would monitor and record neighbors' retaliation attempts. Mrs. Linda would coordinate a door-to-door campaign for neighbor support. Patricia would work from inside, pushing for a board audit. Dale would serve as technical backup for any construction-related evidence, our attorney. Amanda Sterling confirmed we had strong cases for harassment, financial fraud, and misconduct, but timing was everything. Too soon, and neighbor might destroy evidence. Too late, and she might cover her tracks. I thought back to my 22 years, troubleshooting electrical systems. Complex problems require layered solutions. Fighting HOA corruption with just property rights arguments was like trying to fix a short by swapping one fuse. You've got to address the whole circuit, so we plan to strike on all fronts. Legal pressure with lawsuits and criminal complaints, social pressure through neighbor petitions, and organizing political pressure with media and city oversight, financial pressure by canceling shady contracts and forcing audits by Wednesday morning. The community campaign was underway. Armed with binders of evidence and polished presentations, I went house to house. The response was overwhelming. 89 signatures in support of property rights, 34 demanding audits, 12 volunteers ready to testify, even Mrs. V. Johnny from Maple Street, who almost shut her door in my face, ended up angrily signing after I explained. "That woman fined me for having my garbage can out 15 minutes early," she fumed. 15 minutes. Like she's running a stopwatch. Patterns became clear. Neighbors' staunch supporters were long-term homeowners who benefited from her selective enforcement. The fence-sitters were mostly new residents, afraid of retaliation. But the majority wanted accountability, and they were ready to fight for it. We prepped the media next. Channel 7's investigative unit specialized in corruption stories, and reporter Sarah Kim had covered HOAs before. Our press kit was airtight. Professional graphics, legal opinions, and a 12-minute video montage of neighbors' repeated trash can collisions. Meanwhile, the story caught fire online. Our neighborhood transparency group doubled in size within days. Residents began sharing their own stories of selective enforcement and harassment. Someone even edited a viral time-lapse of neighbors' daily SUV crashes set to circus music. The neighborhood kids called it the indestructible trash can. And even my son started charging classmates 50 cents to watch the highlight reel on his phone. By Sunday, everything was in place. Monday night's board meeting would be packed, Wednesday morning's media interviews scheduled, criminal complaints ready to file. 118 residents committed to showing up. Neighbor had no idea what was coming, but desperate people do desperate things. That weekend, she completely unraveled. Late Saturday night, I was startled awake by the hiss of spray paint. From my window, I saw a crouched figure illuminated by the motion lights, scrawling the word "move" across my concrete trash can in bright orange paint. By the time I grabbed my phone and ran outside, they were gone. But spray paint washes off in 30 seconds. Security cameras, however, record everything, including the license plate of a pearl white Escalade parked 5 houses down. Monday brought a new stunt. An anonymous tip to the gas company accused me of illegal digging that could damage underground lines. The inspector spent 2 hours scanning my property before shaking his head. No violations here. Whoever reported this either can't see straight or has some other issues. The final straw came Monday morning. Jim found me at the hardware store, his face grim. Homeowner, he said. She hired private security. $200 a day for surveillance over a trash can dispute. She's lost it. But what she didn't know was that my cameras had been recording her to her late-night drive-bys, her frantic photo sessions, and her escalating paranoia. She was unraveling, and every second was documented. By Wednesday, the pettiness turned cruel. My daughter Tyler came home in tears. Neighbor had been whispering to another parent, spreading lies about bad influences and dangerous role models in the neighborhood, clearly aimed at us. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was personal. And that's when I knew Neighbor's empire was crumbling, and we were about to deliver the final blow. The racial undertones weren't subtle, and the impact on my custody case was impossible to ignore. That night, I brought in Beth Morisana, retired police detective who now specializes in harassment investigations. For $200 a day, she could professionally document neighbors' stalking behavior and testify with law enforcement credibility about her escalating patterns by midweek. The sabotage reached new levels. Someone poured what looked like battery acid on my concrete trash can. It left a stain, but no real damage. Anonymous complaints poured into the city about everything from my lawn height to supposed permit violations. Fake negative reviews flooded my business page faster than I could report them. But Friday evening brought the real shock. Tyler was fixing his bike in the driveway when he spotted something unusual under my work truck, a small black device with blinking lights, held in place by a magnet. "Dad," he called out, voice tight with worry. "What's this thing under?" "Your truck, a GPS tracker. Professional grade, worth a few $100s, and definitely illegal when placed without consent." I documented it from every angle, removed it carefully, and drove straight to the police station. Officer Derek Martinez took the report, his face set in the tired expression of someone who'd seen this escalation before. "Mr. Homeowner," he said, "this isn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. This is criminal, authorized surveillance, stalking, harassment. We're building a case file that could carry real charges." Meanwhile, the insurance angle was unraveling. Neighbor had filed a $3,200 claim for road hazard damage, insisting her SUV accident happened on a city street. The problem? My security cameras had weeks of footage showing her deliberately ramming into my trash can. When State Farm's investigator arrived, I handed over everything. 53 documented collision attempts, witness statements, a full video compilation, and professional assessments of the damage. His response was immediate. "Ma'am," he told neighbor later, "this isn't road damage. This is intentional vehicle abuse and attempted fraud. We're denying the claim and referring this to our fraud division." The pressure cooker was about to explode. Our Facebook group swelled to 94 members, all sharing their own stories of neighbors' harassment. Mrs. Patterson complained about being cited for rose bushes. The Johnsons on Oak Street had been fined over their kids' sidewalk chalk art. Even Gerald Thornfield, once. Neighbors' staunch ally was beginning to distance himself. Saturday morning brought collision attempt number 57. This time, bumper ripped completely off and landed in my driveway. I was watching her in business clothes, crawling around to collect broken pieces while half the neighborhood peeked from their windows. It would have been hilarious if it wasn't so sad. By Sunday evening, our case file was airtight. Criminal behavior documented, witnesses ready, financial fraud exposed, a coalition of neighbors united. Monday's HOA board meeting wasn't going to be a confrontation, it was going to be a reckoning, but Monday morning, just 12 hours before our showdown neighbor tried one last desperate play, Gerald Thornfield called an emergency closed-door session, citing liability concerns and community safety. His voice on my voicemail sounded like gravel mixed with panic. Inside, 5 board members huddled with the HOA's attorney, Harold Masterson, who was billing $400 an hour to figure out how bad things had gotten. Patricia Lopez texted me from inside. "Neighbors claiming you made terrorist threats. She wants emergency powers to shut you down. Harold looks like he'd rather defend serial offenders than touch this mess." The cover-up attempt was clumsy. At best, someone had backdated disclosure forms for neighbor construction, but the digital timestamps told another story. You can't fake ethics compliance when the original contract votes are locked in public records. Meanwhile, the state insurance investigation was accelerating. Investigator Maria Santos had subpoenaed the HOA's financial records, meeting minutes, and correspondence with the insurance carrier. The paper trail was a slow-motion train wreck, and then came the twist. Monday afternoon, Richard, neighbor's husband, called me directly. His voice was low, almost broken. "Homeowner," he said, "this has to stop. She's spent over $8,000 on lawyers, surveillance, and repairs. Our insurance is canceled. The business is bleeding contracts. What would it take to make this go away?" For a brief moment, I almost pitied him. "Almost, Richard," I said. "Your wife stalked my family, vandalized my property, tried to commit fraud, and stole from over 100 homeowners. This doesn't go away with an apology or a check." 2 hours before the board meeting, neighbor made her boldest and most reckless move yet. She filed for an emergency restraining order using fake voicemails, doctored photos, and even witness names that didn't exist. Judge Patricia Williams dismissed it instantly. "Miss Neighbor," she said, "these recordings are clearly edited, these photos staged, and these witnesses appear to be fictional. Filing false evidence is contempt of court. Consider this your only warning." But her troubles were only beginning. The state insurance commissioner's fraud unit was now fully involved. The district attorney was reviewing harassment and stalking charges. The IRS had received documentation of unreported income tied to her construction contracts. By 6 p.m., the community center was overflowing. Cars lined both sides of Maple Street. Neighbors walked in with folding chairs and homemade signs. Channel 7's news van arrived, followed by Channel 12 and a Metro Weekly reporter. Inside, the room meant for 40 people was crammed with 118 angry residents, standing shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with nervous sweat and burnt coffee, and then neighbor arrived. Late, flanked by her lawyer, looking like someone who knew the walls were finally closing in. Her usual navy blazer had been swapped for funeral black, and the tremor in her hands was visible even from across the room. At the board table, Gerald Thornfield kept tugging at his tie like a noose was tightening around his neck. Their attempt at intimidation was collapsing right in front of everyone. Attorney Harold Masterson began with a stiff speech about frivolous complaints and disruptive residents, but he didn't get far. Mrs. Linda rose to her feet, clutching a thick stack of papers. "Excuse me?" she said in her careful but steady voice. "But which one of us has been committing insurance fraud and mishandling community funds?" The room exploded in applause and nervous laughter. 17 neighbors had signed up to speak. During public comment, each armed with documentation proof of harassment, financial discrepancies, and selective enforcement of rules. 5 full bankers' boxes overflowed with evidence, videos of collisions, contract reviews, criminal complaint receipts, and yet the real bombshell hadn't even landed at exactly 6:47. His neighbor tried to sidestep questions about her family's construction contracts. The doors opened. Officer Derek Martinez stepped inside, holding a thick folder. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I have a warrant to serve regarding insurance fraud and stalking charges." The color drained from neighbors. Face faster than coolant from her battered SUV. Masterson bent low, whispering frantic legal advice, while Thornfield looked pale enough to faint. The game was over. The community center had never seen anything like it. 127 residents, virtually the entire neighborhood crammed into a room built for 40, 15 members of the press, adjusted their cameras as though preparing for a national debate. The air conditioning couldn't keep up with the heat, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like wasps sensing blood. I had positioned myself in the third row, flanked by Mrs. Linda and Eli Torres, with my concrete trash can exhibitor rolled in beside the podium. Monument to her obsession now turned against her. Neighbor looked cornered. Every few seconds, her eyes darted toward the exit like a trapped animal searching for a way out. Masterson muttered in her ear. Thornfield sweated through his shirt. The folder in Officer Martinez's hand shifted the mood from heated debate to courtroom drama. The only sounds were the hum of news cameras and the nervous tap-tap of neighbors. Pen against the table like Morse code for "help me." When Gerald called the meeting to order, his voice cracked like a teenager's. "Will now hear public comments." I stood first, carrying my presentation boards like a prosecutor facing a jury. The room was so quiet you could hear the buzz of the exit sign. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "this isn't about trash cans. This isn't about bylaws, property values, or neighborhood standards. This is about accountability, transparency, and stopping corruption before it destroys our community." I laid out the facts step by step. 57 documented collisions, each caught on high-definition video, a GPS tracker, illegally attached to my vehicle, spray paint vandalism on my property, fraudulent, insurance claims felonies on their own. Then came the showstopper, the borrowed projector. I revealed the contract analysis. $23,400 siphoned from HOA dues straight into neighbor's family business every month. I told the room you've been paying inflated fees to cover her personal construction company. 7 contracts, 7 conflicts of interest, 7 violations of state nonprofit law. Gasps rippled through the audience. The video compilation followed a 12-minute highlight reel of her failed collisions, set against the sounds of crunching plastic and scraping metal. People laughed, winced, and shook their heads in disbelief. And then came the line I'd been saving. "Mrs. Neighbor, you've spent $3,400 on lawyers, wrecked your $60,000 SUV, filed false claims, and stalked my family over a $23 trash can. But the real crime? The $47,000 you've stolen from this community?" The crowd erupted. Neighbors who had long wondered about rising fees finally had their answer. Mrs. Johnny shouted in Spanish. Teenagers from Elm Street clapped like they were at a concert. Neighbor broke. She shot out of her chair, screaming, "This is harassment. These people don't understand property values. They don't belong here." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implication. Channel 7's cameras caught every second of her unraveling. Mrs. Linda gasped audibly as neighbor pointed at her and accused certain elements of ruining the neighborhood. Masterson tried to calm her, but neighbor was past reason. I lunged for my presentation boards, tearing at them before Eli Torres and 2 others gently restrained her. Mascara streaked, her face like black tears as she shrieked, I built this community. I protected property values, and this is how you repay me? It was chaos louder than a soap opera, more satisfying than reality TV. Gerald pounded his gavel in vain. Patricia Lopez finally stood and declared, I move for the immediate suspension of neighbor from the board, pending criminal investigation and financial audit. The vote was unanimous. 4-0. Neighbor abstained, handcuffed to her chair. Justice served concrete cold with a side of public humiliation. The fallout was swift. Within 48 hours, neighbor's empire crumbled. She resigned Monday morning, calling it a hostile environment. By Thursday, the district attorney filed fraud charges carrying 6 months jail time and thousands in fines. By Friday, her insurance license was revoked and her construction company's certification suspended. The HOA audit recovered $47,000 in overcharges. By Christmas, every homeowner held a refund check, the sweetest holiday surprise our neighborhood had ever seen. Richard Neighbor called me one last time, his voice hollow. The settlement check is in the mail, he said. $12,500, as agreed. Neighbor's moving to Florida to live with her sister. For a brief moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the GPS tracker, false claims, and the months of harassment. Some lessons are expensive. This one cost them everything. From the ashes, change took root. Patricia Lopez was unanimously elected board president on a platform of transparency. The new board introduced conflict of interest disclosures monthly, financial reports, and open bidding for contracts. Our first community project under this new leadership, a playground renovation funded entirely by the recovered money. Watching Tyler and Tyler help design the new play structures, surrounded by neighbors who once whispered about our disruptive family, felt like the sweetest form of justice. Emotional vindication wrapped in progress. The impact of our fight reached far beyond our neighborhood. Homeowner versus Pinewood Gardens HOA became a legal precedent, later cited in 12 different property rights cases across Ohio, the state. Legislature even passed the HOA Accountability Act, a landmark law requiring strict financial disclosures and audit procedures. A reform that insurance investigators praised as the gold standard for community oversight. Channel 7's investigative series covering the scandal went on to win a regional Emmy for exposing suburban corruption. Reporter Sarah Kim still calls me from time to time, asking for expert commentary whenever new HOA reform legislation comes up. Meanwhile, the original collision videos have been watched more than 200,000 times on YouTube, sparking similar movements. In neighborhoods from Toledo to Cincinnati, my once ordinary concrete trash can became a community legend. We eventually moved it into the community center lobby as a permanent display, complete with a bronze plaque that proudly reads, Property Rights Protected, 2023 now. Every new homeowner who joins Pinewood Gardens learns the full story during their orientation meeting. It's no longer just a memory, it's a reminder of how ordinary people stood up, fought back, and changed everything. The impact of our fight reached far beyond our neighborhood. Homeowner versus Pinewood Gardens HOA became a legal precedent, later cited in 12 different property rights cases across Ohio. The state legislature even passed the HOA Accountability Act, a landmark law requiring strict financial disclosures and audit procedures. A reform that insurance investigators praised as the gold standard for community oversight. Channel 7's investigative series covering the scandal went on to win a regional Emmy for exposing suburban corruption. Reporter Sarah Kim still calls me from time to time, asking for expert commentary whenever new HOA reform legislation comes up. Meanwhile, the original collision videos have been watched more than 200,000 times on YouTube, sparking similar movements. In neighborhoods from Toledo to Cincinnati, my once ordinary concrete trash can became a community legend. We eventually moved it into the community center lobby as a permanent display, complete with a bronze plaque that proudly reads, Property Rights Protected, 2023 now. Every new homeowner who joins Pinewood Gardens learns the full story during their orientation meeting. It's no longer just a memory, it's a reminder of how ordinary people stood up, fought back, and changed everything. The impact of our fight stretched far beyond our neighborhood. Homeowner versus Pinewood Gardens, HOA, became a legal precedent. Cited in 12 property rights cases across Ohio, soon after, the state legislature passed the HOA Accountability Act, a law that required full financial disclosure and regular audits. Investigators praised it as the new gold standard for community oversight channel. Seven's investigative series on Our Battle even won a regional Emmy for exposing suburban corruption. Their lead reporter, Sarah Kim, still calls me from time to time whenever new HOA reform bills appear. The story reached millions in another way too.
Ow.
The original collision videos have been viewed more than 200,000 times on YouTube, inspiring resistance movements in neighborhoods from Toledo to Cincinnati. And that concrete trash can, it became a symbol. We placed it in the community center lobby as a permanent display, complete with a bronze plaque that reads, "Property Rights Protected 2023. Now, every new homeowner hears the full story during their orientation. What started as one family standing up to abuse has become a legacy proof that ordinary people can fight back, protect their rights, and change the system for good.